She came awake like a trapped thing. One hand flew to her throat, the other reached for a weapon that was not there. Wade Mercer caught her wrist before she could tear open the bandage on her side. Her whole body shook under the blanket. Her eyes were green and wild and full of a fear so deep it looked older than she was. Crow lifted his head from the floor and gave one low warning sound, not at her but at the memory chasing her. She tried to pull away from the cot. Failed. Tried again. Breath broke in her chest. Then she whispered, so rough he barely heard it, "Don't let them take me back." Wade had seen men beg for morphine, water, mercy, and death. He had seen soldiers lie through blood and fever, but this was different. This was terror with a face behind it, a real one, a human one. He tightened his hand around her wrist just enough to keep her still and said the plainest thing he knew. "Nobody's taking you anywhere." She stared at him like she wanted to believe him and knew better than to try. Then her gaze shifted past his shoulder to the black-backed dog by the fire. Something softened in her face for one small second. "He found me," she said. Wade looked at Crow. The dog did not blink, and Wade felt it again, that cold pull in his chest he had been trying not to name. Who in God's name had Crow dragged out of the dust? 3 days earlier, Wade had been riding the North Wash above Red Mesa with no plan bigger than getting home before dark. The summer wind had teeth that afternoon. It came in hot from the west and drove little spirals of sand across the flats. Crow had been trotting ahead of the bay gelding, weaving through stone and sage, doing what he always did when the land got too quiet. Then he stopped hard, his ears lifted, his body turned to one fixed point like a compass snapping north. Wade trusted that dog more than he trusted memory. Crow had pulled him out from under a kicked steer in Abilene. Crow had found water once when even the horses were blowing dry. So when the dog broke into a run, Wade did not waste time calling him back. He swung down from the saddle near a dead mesquite and followed. The woman was half hidden in the lee of a broken outcrop. At first he thought she was dead. Her dress was almost the same color as the dirt now, faded and torn into strips by brush and weather. One sleeve hung off her shoulder. Her hair was crusted with dust and old blood. A buzzard flapped off the rocks when Wade stepped closer, and Crow bared his teeth so fast the bird never dared circle back. Wade crouched and held 2 fingers under the woman's nose. There it was, a breath, thin as thread, barely there. He gave her water in drops. Most ran from the corner of her mouth. Some went down. Her lips moved once, but whatever word had tried to leave her died before it reached air. He saw bruises on her wrists, rope marks. A split at the edge of her mouth. Cuts across both ankles where thorns or shackles had chewed her raw. There was a deep welt low on her ribs, old enough to darken, fresh enough to hurt. Nothing about her looked accidental. He should have taken her to town. That was the lawful thing. Also the foolish thing. Men in towns asked questions before they offered help, and Wade had long since learned that the wrong question could kill faster than a bullet. So he lifted her into the saddle, tied her steady with his bedroll, and turned the horse toward a hunting cabin tucked in Cottonwood Hollow at the base of the Red Hills. Crow ran ahead the whole way, looking back every few yards as if he needed to make sure Wade understood the weight of what he was carrying. The cabin had been his father's once, back before debt and whiskey and bad luck stripped the Mercer family down to one tired son and a patch of hard land no banker wanted. It was no place for a lady, but it had a roof that mostly held and a door that still barred. Wade laid her on the narrow cot under the west window, built a fire, boiled water, and did the ugly work that comes before comfort. He cleaned the blood from her hair, picked grit from her cuts, wrapped her side. When he poured whiskey over the worst wound, her body jerked though her eyes stayed closed. Crow whined and rested his muzzle on the edge of the cot. "She ain't dying tonight," Wade told him, though he was not sure. The dog settled only after Wade said it a second time. The first day passed with fever, the second with silence. She drifted in and out, drinking when he lifted the tin cup, turning away when the pain got sharp. Twice she woke screaming names that meant nothing to him. Once she shoved so hard against the blanket that she ripped the stitches loose and bled through. Wade held her shoulders until the storm passed. She bit down on his hand without knowing it was his. He did not curse. just waited until her jaw slackened and the terror burned itself out. By the third morning she could sit up. Not long, not steady, but long enough to look around and understand she was still alive. She studied the one-room cabin, the rifle above the door, the skillet hanging by the hearth, the patched curtains, the dog asleep with one eye open, and finally the man sitting near the table mending a cinched strap. "You the one found me?" she asked. Wade nodded toward Crow. He did. Her gaze shifted to the dog. Crow rose, walked over slow, and placed his head near her knee. She stared down at him like she had been given back something stolen. Her fingers moved once through the fur behind his ears. Not much, just enough for Crow to decide she belonged here for now. "Do you know your name?" Wade asked. A long pause followed, too long. Her eyes dropped to the blanket over her lap. No. It was a lie, not a good one either, but Wade did not call her on it. A person hiding her name usually had a reason. "You remember who did this?" Her mouth tightened. "No." Another lie, this one hurt more to say. Wade leaned back in his chair. "All right." She lifted her eyes at that. Men usually pressed when a woman hesitated. That was what her face told him, pressed for truth, pressed for gratitude, pressed for things that were not theirs. Wade did none of it. He cut a strip of salt pork with his knife, set a biscuit beside it, and slid the plate across the crate he used as a bedside stand. "You eat what you can. Sleep when you can. That's enough for now." She looked at the food like it might disappear if she blinked. Then she ate too fast and nearly choked. Crow's ears flicked. Wade reached over, handed her the water cup, and waited until the fit passed. She gave a small nod that was not quite thanks. On the fifth day she stood for the first time. Her legs shook so badly Wade thought she would go down, but she caught the bedpost and stayed upright. She wore one of his old shirts belted at the waist and a pair of wool socks rolled down at the ankle. The shirt swallowed her frame. She had the look of someone built finer once before hunger carved her down. "Slow," he said. She gave him a flat look. "I know what slow is." That almost made him smile. Almost. By evening she was strong enough to sit outside the cabin door while Crow lay across the threshold and Wade split kindling. The desert spread out below the hollow in long bands of gold and red. Heat still rose from the stones, though the sky had begun to soften. She watched everything, the line of the wash, the ridge to the south, the hawk circling high, the path down through the cottonwoods. A hunted person always studied escape first. Wade noticed, said nothing. After a while she asked, "Why didn't you leave me out there?" He set the axe head into the stump and wiped his hand on his trousers. "Because you were breathing." "That's not reason enough for most men." "No," he said, "it ain't." She turned that over in silence. Then she asked the question he had known was coming. "What's your name?" "Wade Mercer." Something changed in her face. Very little, just a flicker, but Crow noticed it too. The dog raised his head. "You know it?" Wade asked. She looked away too quickly. "Maybe I heard it somewhere." He did not believe that. He had become good at hearing the hollow place in a lie. Still, he let it pass. Instead he asked, "What should I call you?" She was quiet long enough for the wind to move through the cottonwoods and back again. When she answered, her voice was careful. "Call me June." Not her name either. Wade would have wagered his horse on that. "All right," he said, "June." That night after she had gone back inside, Wade sat alone at the table turning a thought over that had started as a whisper and was now digging in like a thorn. He had noticed the mark earlier while changing the bandage on her wrist. A pale ring burned into the skin on the inside of her arm. Not cattle brand work. Too neat. Too deliberate. A circle with a faint break at the top like an unfinished seal. He had seen that mark before. Not on flesh. On paper. Years ago, before the war, before his mother's death, before he became the kind of man who kept to himself because it was easier, a letter had arrived from eastern Kansas. It carried talk of land, family debts, and a marriage promise made between two houses trying not to drown. Wade had been too young and too angry to care much about a girl he had never met, but he remembered the seal on the folded letter. A ring burned into wax, Strange, unmistakable. The name written beneath it had been a leaner veil. The arrangement had fallen apart not long after. The girl vanished. Her family claimed illness, then silence, then nothing at all. Wade had thought of it maybe twice in 10 years. Yet now, in a cabin hidden in Cottonwood Hollow, with a half-dead woman sleeping under his roof and Crow posted at her door like a sentry, that old memory rose clear enough to touch. He looked toward the cot in the dark. Crow was there, chin on his paws, facing outward. Wade spoke so low only the dog could hear. "Tell me you didn't drag my promised bride out of the dirt." Crow thumped his tail once against the floorboards, and from the cot, in a voice barely above sleep, the woman whispered, "Don't send me back to my father." Wade went still. He did not move for a long time after that. The fire cracked. The wind pressed once against the wall. Crow lifted his head and looked from Wade to the sleeping woman and back again, as if waiting for the man to catch up to the truth the dog had known from the start. Wade did not sleep after that. He sat by the dying fire and watched the shape of her beneath the blanket while the words settled in his chest like iron. She had not said his name. She had not called herself Elena. But she had spoken of a father, and fear had moved through her even in sleep. By dawn, he had decided only one thing. He would not force the truth out of her. A woman dragged half-dead from the desert had earned at least that much. Still, he could not look at the mark on her wrist now without seeing the old letter in his mind, the scorched seal, the promise neither of them had chosen. Morning came hard and bright. Heat climbed early through Cottonwood Hollow. June was awake before he finished with the horses. She stood by the small basin near the window, sleeves rolled, trying to wash dried blood from the ends of her hair. Her hands were steadier now, not steady enough to hide the tremor when he stepped inside. "You should still be resting," Wade said. She did not turn. "I've been resting for days." "You've been healing. That ain't the same thing." At that she glanced over her shoulder. "You always this pleasant." "Only when folks ignore plain sense." A faint shadow of something crossed her face. It was not a smile, more like the memory of one. Crow walked over and leaned against her leg. She set a hand on his head without thinking. That small motion told Wade more than words could. The dog trusted few people fast. The fact that he had taken to her like this meant something, though Wade could not yet say what. She finished with the washcloth and moved toward the table. There was a limp in her right leg now, less than before, but still there. He set coffee down and broke a biscuit in two. "Eat." "I know how." "I ain't arguing that." She sat. For a moment the cabin felt almost normal. A man at his table, a woman in borrowed clothes, a dog stretched by the door. Morning light on rough boards. Then June looked up and asked, "What did I say last night?" Wade met her eyes. "You tell me." A long silence followed. She looked back at the cup in her hands. "I don't remember." That was a better lie than the first ones. Softer, more careful, but still a lie. He sat across from her. "You said not to send you back to your father." Her fingers tightened around the tin cup, not enough to spill it, enough for him to see. "I talk in my sleep." "Seems so." She nodded once, "Then don't listen." Wade let that hang between them. "If a man did this to you, I need to know what kind of man he is." She stared at the table for so long Crow lifted his head and looked between them. Finally she said, "The kind who smiles while he does it." That answer sat heavy in the room. Wade did not press harder. He asked instead, "Anyone looking for you?" Her laugh came out dry and mean. "Not for the reasons decent people look." So that was how it was. No reward poster, no grieving family, no frightened husband riding the counties in a panic. Whoever wanted her buried or brought back broken. Wade had seen enough of the world to know both kinds of men existed. By afternoon she insisted on helping with chores. He told her no twice. The third time he handed her a small pail and pointed to the water barrel out back, more to stop the argument than because he needed help. She carried it carefully, jaw set, anger doing half the work for her. Wade watched from the fence as she moved across the yard. She was still weak but not delicate. There was grit in her, not the loud kind men bragged about, a quieter kind, the sort that kept a body walking after it should have fallen. When she came back with the full pail, sloshing only a little, Crow trotted beside her like an escort. "You don't have to shadow me," she told the dog. Crow ignored her and kept pace. Wade took the pail from her. "He ain't shadowing, he's guarding." "From what?" He looked out toward the wash. "We'll know when it gets here." She followed his gaze. The hollow was still. Cottonwood leaves flickered silver in the light breeze. Farther off, the desert shimmered. Nothing moved except one hawk turning slow above the ridge. But Wade had lived too long by instinct to trust quiet. Trouble had a way of arriving on the day a person started believing they were safe. That evening he saddled the bay and rode down to a line shack half a mile east where he kept spare grain and old tools. When he returned, he found June behind the cabin with his revolver in both hands. She had taken it from the shelf over the hearth. He knew because he always left it handle out to the left, and now it was handle out to the right. Crow sat 5 feet away, watching her with full attention. She had not pointed the gun at anything living. That was the first thing Wade noticed. The second was the way she held it, wrong but not foolish, like someone copying a memory her body knew better than her mind. He stepped from the saddle and said nothing. She turned at the sound, did not flinch. Did not lower the gun either. "I was putting it back," she said. "You planning to use it?" "If I have to." "Ever fired one?" Her eyes hardened. "Maybe." There it was again, the wall, the half-truth, the wounded pride beneath it. Wade tied off the horse and walked toward her. "Maybe gets people killed." She looked down at the revolver. "Then show me." He stopped 3 paces away. That was not what he had expected. Crow stood and moved to her side. "Why?" Wade asked. June looked past him toward the red hills. "Because if they find me again, I don't want to be helpless." There was no tremble in her voice this time, just fact, bare, cold, honest. Wade took the revolver from her carefully and opened the chamber. "You don't start with fear. Fear makes you yank the trigger." "What do you start with?" He handed the empty gun back. "Breath." For the next hour he showed her how to stand, how to plant her feet, how to keep her wrist from collapsing. She listened the way starving people eat. Quiet, hard, full attention. When he stepped behind her once to straighten her elbow, her whole body locked up, not from modesty, from memory. Wade moved away at once. "Like this?" she asked after a while. He looked at the line of her arm, the set of her shoulders. "Better." They practiced dry until sunset bled across the hollow. No shot fired, no target set, just the shape of readiness. Crow stayed beside them the whole time, ears turning with every sound, as if he understood this lesson mattered more than the others. Later, after supper, June sat by the fire cleaning potatoes while Wade patched leather at the table. The cabin was quiet except for knife on skin, thread through hide, wood settling in the heat. Then she asked, too casually, "You ever know a family named Vale?" Wade's hand stilled, only for a breath, but she saw it. "Why?" he asked. "No reason." He set the leather down. "I was promised to a girl once, long ago, name of Eliza Vale." June kept peeling, one strip, then another, too evenly, too carefully. "Did you love her?" "I never met her." "Then why remember?" "Because folks don't usually forget a stranger they're told will be their future." Her knife stopped. She stared at the potato in her hand. "And what happened?" "Word came she vanished." June let out a slow breath. Maybe she ran. Maybe. Maybe she was smarter than the men making plans for her. Wade almost said yes. Instead, he watched her face in the firelight, soot gold on her skin, green eyes darker at the edges, a scar near the hairline he had only just started to see now that the blood was gone. He realized then that he no longer cared whether she was Eliza Vale in truth. What he cared about was the look in her eyes when she thought a door might open behind her. That was worse. He rose to bank the fire. "Get some sleep." She set the half-peeled potato aside. "Wade." He paused. "If I tell you something later and it changes matters, will you still let Crow stay with me?" The question hit him harder than it should have. He looked at the dog sprawled by her boots, already half asleep, like he had chosen his post for the night. Crow goes where he wants. A little of the tension went out of her shoulders. Good. Sometime past midnight, Crow growled. Not loud, not wild, low and certain. Wade was on his feet before the second sound came. Hoofbeats, more than one horse, slow coming through the wash below the hollow. June was already awake on the cot, one hand under the blanket where his empty revolver lay. Her eyes met his in the dark, fully alert now. How many? She whispered. He moved to the window and listened. 3, maybe 4. Her face lost what little color it had regained. You know them, Wade said. She swallowed, said nothing. That was answer enough. Crow's hackles rose. Outside, leather creaked. A man laughed once, soft and ugly, like he already expected to be welcomed in. Then a voice drifted up from the dark below the cabin. We're looking for a girl in a blue dress, the man called. Thin thing, easy to miss if you ain't paying attention. June shut her eyes for one brief second. When she opened them again, fear was still there, but something else had joined it. Not surrender, not anymore. Wade lifted the rifle from above the door and handed her the revolver, loaded now. June, he said, though both of them knew that was not her name, you want to run or fight? Her grip closed around the gun. Steady this time, fight. The men below the cabin were not in any hurry. That told Wade plenty. Men who feared trouble rode fast, shouted first, and reached for guns too soon. These riders came on slow, like they had followed blood before and expected this ending to be no different. Wade stood just off the window and listened to leather creak, bits clink, horses breathe through their noses. Crow's growl stayed low in his chest. June rose from the cot without another word and moved beside the hearth. The revolver looked heavy in her hand, but she did not hold it like a stranger now. Fear still lived in her face, it just no longer ruled it. Another voice drifted up from below. We know she's here. Wade kept his rifle angled toward the door. Maybe you do, he said. Still ain't reason enough for me to open it. One of the riders laughed. Ain't your quarrel, Cowboy? Wade looked once at June. Her jaw had gone tight. He turned back toward the dark. Funny thing about men who say that usually means it is. Silence followed. Then the first rider spoke again, less patient now. Girl belongs to her father. At that, June made a sound so small Wade almost missed it. Not a gasp, something flatter, colder, recognition with no surprise left in it. Wade said, a grown woman don't belong to anybody. The answer came sharp. She does if coin changed hands. Crow rose fully then, every hair along his back standing up. Wade heard June suck in one hard breath. That was enough. No more guessing. No more half-truths dressed up as manners. Whoever sat those horses had come for a person as if she were freight. Wade stepped to the door and lifted the bar. June stared at him. What are you doing? She whispered, changing the conversation. He opened the door just enough to take a look. 3 riders in the wash and one farther back holding the spare horses. Moonlight caught on gunmetal and teeth. The one in front wore a pale hat and a dark coat with no dust on it, which meant he liked other men doing his hard riding for him. He was broad through the chest and soft around the mouth. The sort who let crueler men act first, then collected the ease of it after. You found your voice, the rider said. Wade leaned against the frame like he had all night to spare. You found the wrong cabin. The man tipped his chin toward the shadow inside. Just hand her over. No. The man's expression did not change, but the 2 riders beside him shifted in their saddles. That tiny movement told Wade all he needed. They were hired muscle, not loyal blood. Good. Hired men broke easier. Maybe you don't understand, the man said. Her father wants her returned. June stepped into the doorway behind Wade before he could stop her. The moon found her face, found the healing bruise along her cheek, the cut at her brow, the hollow under her eyes. One of the riders cursed under his breath like he had seen a dead thing rise. The front rider stared. Well now, he said softly, you should have stayed buried. June's voice came flat as stone. I tried. Wade felt the truth of that sit hard in the air. The rider smiled. Come on, miss. Nobody needs to bleed over a family matter. June lifted the revolver, not quite straight but close enough. It stopped being family when he sold me. That changed the men, not the leader. Men like him did not have enough soul left for shame, but the rider to his right glanced sideways just once, and Wade knew then there was rot in the story. Even the hired hands had not been told plain. The leader saw it too. His tone snapped colder. Take her. The one nearest the door reached first. He never finished the motion. Wade fired from the shoulder and the man pitched out of the saddle before the echo died. Crow flew from the doorway in the same instant, black shape low and fast, teeth finding the second horseman's arm before the man could clear leather. The horse screamed and reared. June shot wide her first time, the bullet slamming sparks from a rock, but she did not freeze. She fired again. This shot caught the second rider high in the throat. He made a choking sound and went down tangled in reins and dog and dust. The leader wheeled his horse hard, smart enough now to know the cabin was not easy prey. He pulled his own gun, but Wade was already moving. He hit the porch post, rolled, and fired from one knee. The shot clipped the man's shoulder and spun him sideways in the saddle. Not dead, not yet. The fourth rider in back turned his mount and bolted before Wade ever aimed. Cowardice had good instincts. The leader tried to run too. June came down off the porch like she'd forgotten pain existed. Her third shot struck the fleeing horse in the hindquarter. The animal bucked, stumbled, and sent the rider crashing into the wash. Crow was on him before he found his feet. Call him off, the man screamed. Wade stepped down slow, rifle still up. June followed, breathing hard, revolver shaking now that the noise had ended. Crow stood over the man with blood on his muzzle and murder in his eyes. Who sent you? Wade asked. The man clutched his shoulder and glared up through the dust. You know who. Say it. He spat blood, Mr. Vale. June went still, truly still. Wade could feel it beside him without looking. What he pay you? Wade asked. The man looked at June and gave a mean little smile through the pain. Enough. She's worth more alive than dead. That was the word. June took one step forward. To who? He saw something in her face then, something that made the smile falter. That weren't my business. She took another step. It is now. He laughed again, but it sounded thinner. You still don't know, do you? Wade moved the rifle barrel to the man's mouth. Careful. The rider's eyes flicked to the steel and back. Her father sold her twice, first to settle debt, then again when she ran. Men been looking for months. She was meant for the South camps. She brought good money. June's hand dropped to her side, not loose, numb. Wade felt a hot, clean kind of rage rise in him, not noisy, not wild, the kind that steadied a man's breathing and made him dangerous. Where is Vale now? Wade asked. The rider hesitated. Crow growled, deep, certain. San Tomas, the man blurted. At the old rail hotel, meeting a buyer in 3 days. June blinked once, like she had heard a foreign language and still understood every word. Buyer. The man glanced at her wrist, at the mark there. You think that brand was for family? He asked. It marked inventory. The next sound June made did not belong to a frightened woman. It belonged to something breaking clean in two. She raised the revolver. Wade caught her wrist before she fired. She turned on him with such fury he almost let go. Move. You don't shoot an unarmed man from 3 feet when you're shaking this bad. He came for me. I know. You don't know anything. That part was not true, and both of them knew it. The rider on the ground chose that moment badly. Your father said you'd bend eventually. June fired before Wade could stop her again. The bullet took the man in the chest. He jerked once and went still. The wash fell quiet except for the horses and June's breathing. Crow backed away from the body and returned to her side at once. She looked down at the dead man like she did not recognize herself in what she had done. Then she turned away and staggered 1 step toward the dark. Wade reached for her shoulder. She flinched so hard he dropped his hand. Don't, she said, so he didn't. They dragged the bodies far enough from the cabin to keep scavengers from gathering at the door by dawn. Wade stripped the dead men of cartridges, knives, and anything useful, then sent the surviving horses loose into the wash. June said nothing while he worked. Crow stayed so close to her his flank brushed her skirt whenever she moved. At first light, Wade found her behind the cabin sitting on the flat stone near the rain barrel, arms around her knees, staring toward the south. The desert looked pale and exhausted at that hour, like a land that had seen too much and planned to see more. He stood a few feet away. "You going to tell me your real name now?" For a long time he thought she might not answer. Then she said, "Eliza." He waited. Eliza Vale. There it was, not a guess now, not a memory on old paper, truth given plain and stripped of shelter. Wade let out a slow breath he had not known he was holding. "You knew," she said without looking at him. "I suspected." "Since when?" "The mark on your wrist." She nodded once. "My mother used the same seal on letters, said it kept evil from crossing thresholds." Her mouth twisted. "Looks like evil just walked through the front door instead." Wade sat on the overturned water trough across from her. "I had a letter once, about a marriage arrangement." "I know." He frowned. "You know." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "I saw your name before I ever saw your face. Wade Mercer, son of Thomas Mercer. Red land, small herd, honest blood, stubborn habits." A dead little ghost of humor touched her mouth and vanished. "My father read the letter like he was pricing livestock." Wade felt his jaw set. "Then why come near me at all?" Eliza looked down at Crow's head resting across her boots. "I didn't. Your dog found me." That was true enough to silence him. After a moment she went on. "The marriage bargain ended when my mother died. After that my father started losing money. Cards, land notes, men he should never have trusted. I was still useful to him, so he kept me close until I wasn't worth as much untouched as I was sold." Her voice stayed level, which made the words worse. "I ran once. He had me dragged back. Second time he had me marked. Third time he sold me south." Wade said nothing. The only sound was wind slipping through dry grass. "I killed a man last night," she said. "Yes. I thought it'd feel like freedom." "Did it?" She looked at the sunrise beginning to burn over the ridge. "No, it felt late." He could not argue with that. Crow lifted his head and pushed his nose against her hand. She turned her palm and held the dog's muzzle there. The gesture was small, tender, human. Wade watched it and felt something shift again inside him, something he did not welcome, because wanting anything in this world was how men ended up broken. Eliza spoke without looking up. "You can still send me away." "Where?" She gave a hollow laugh. "Fair point. I ain't handing you over." He paused. "And I ain't turning you out." That brought her eyes back to his. He saw surprise there, real surprise, as if mercy still arrived strange to her. "Why?" she asked. Wade thought of the letter, the seal, the old promise made by two fathers with no business deciding the lives of children. He thought of the half-dead woman Crow had found in the dust. He thought of the men in the wash saying coin changed hands. Then he answered with the only truth he trusted. "Because no man gets to buy what's breathing under my roof." Eliza held his gaze a long moment. Then she nodded once. By noon they had packed enough for travel. Wade knew better than to wait in Cottonwood Hollow for more riders. The man who escaped would carry news south by now. If her father was in San Tomas in 3 days, then every mile mattered. Eliza wrapped extra cartridges in cloth and tucked them into the saddlebag. Wade cleaned the blood from the revolver and showed her again how to reload without fumbling. This time her hands were calm. "You mean to kill him?" Wade asked at last. "My father," she said. He nodded. She set the cylinder in place and looked out toward the open country. "I mean to hear him tell me why." "That all?" "No," she said, "but it's first." Wade saddled the bay and the sorrel mare he kept for packing. Crow circled once, impatient already, like he could smell the trail before they took it. Eliza paused at the cabin door before mounting. She looked back into the dim room where she had bled, slept, lied, healed, and told the truth. Then she shut the door herself. They rode south under a hard white sun. The land opened in long, dusty miles, broken only by dry arroyos, stone ridges, and the skeletons of old fences. Crow ranged ahead, then doubled back, never letting them out of his sight. By late afternoon, the heat pressed like a hand between the shoulder blades. Eliza rode without complaint. Once or twice Wade caught her favoring her side where the old wound still pulled, but she kept going. Near sunset they found a dead rider tucked beneath a stand of greasewood, half hidden from the trail. Wade dismounted first. One look told him the man had not died by weather or chance. Knife under the ribs, pockets turned out, horse gone. Eliza crouched beside the body and went through the coat lining with quick, sure hands. She came up with a black coin no bigger than a silver dollar. Burned onto it was a crude mark, a broken circle crossed by a line. Wade recognized trouble when he saw it, even if he did not know its full name. Eliza's face changed, not fear this time, memory. "I know this," she said. "From where?" She rose slowly, coin clenched tight in her fist. "From the men my father sold me to." The wind moved over the flats. Crow let out a low, uneasy sound. "What kind of men?" Wade asked. Eliza looked toward the south where the sky had gone the color of old blood, the kind that don't lose what they paid for. They made camp in a dry wash where the mesquite grew low and twisted, and the rocks still held a little warmth after dark. Wade built the fire small, no sense giving the whole desert a lantern to follow. Crow lay at the edge of the light with his head up, watching the dark like it had insulted him personally. Eliza sat on her bedroll with the black coin in her palm, turning it back and forth so the fire caught the broken circle cut into its face. Wade handed her a tin cup of coffee. "Tell me." She did not take the cup right away. Her eyes stayed on the coin. "They called themselves the Ashmen where I first heard of them. Later I heard Sundown Riders. Later still I learned they answered to whoever had coin enough and no conscience at all." She finally took the cup and wrapped both hands around it. "They moved women, girls, stolen children, debtors no one would miss, sometimes south, sometimes east, sometimes nowhere at all if a buyer changed his mind." Wade felt his jaw tighten. "Your father dealt with them direct." "Not at first." Eliza looked into the fire. "At first he just owed men who did. Then he learned there was more money in handing over people than land." Her voice did not crack. That made the words hit harder. "He told me once a daughter was wasted on a house that couldn't afford curtains." Crow lifted his head and gave a quiet growl, as if he understood enough. Wade stared into the flames a long moment. "San Tomas still matters, then?" "Yes." "You think your father's meeting one of them there?" "I know he is." She opened her hand and showed him the coin. These were never carried loose, only by riders trusted to deliver terms, payments, routes. If one of their men died on the trail between here and San Tomas, then business is already moving. Wade nodded once. "Then we stop riding careful." That got her attention. "Meaning?" "Meaning we get there before your father gets comfortable." The next morning they were in the saddle before sunrise. The desert felt different now. Less empty, more watched. Wade had lived enough years in hard country to know when a trail had turned from travel into pursuit. Even the air seemed to listen. Crow ran ahead and back, nosing brush lines and washes, doubling to the ridges before reappearing at the horse's shoulders. By noon they hit the salt flats west of Broken Spur. Heat shimmered off the ground in silver waves. Eliza rode with her hat low and her back straight, though Wade could see the strain in the way she shifted against the saddle every few miles. He did not mention it. She would only dig in harder. Near the edge of the flats, Crow stopped so suddenly the bay snorted and sidestepped. Wade followed the dog's line of sight and saw the wagon. It leaned half off the trail with one wheel sunk deep in the crusted earth. Canvas torn, mule gone, flies swarmed the rear boards. Wade drew his rifle and dismounted. Eliza was already off her mare with the revolver out. "Stay behind me," he said. She gave him a flat look. "No." Under any other sky that might have started an argument, not now. Wade moved toward the wagon. Crow went low and silent, circling wide. The smell hit before the sight did. Old blood, sour canvas. Fear turned stale in the heat. Inside were chains bolted to the floor, 3 of them broken. One still closed around a tiny wrist bone with no body attached. Wade stood very still. Eliza climbed up beside him and then went whiter than the salt underfoot. This is one of theirs. There were ledgers in a crate beneath the front bench. Water ruined at the edges but still readable in the middle. Wade flipped through them fast. Dates, numbers, marks instead of names in some places. In others, names only halfway written, like the people had mattered less than the payment. Eliza took one page from his hand so sharply it tore. She stared at a line halfway down the sheet. Her lips parted but no sound came. "What is it?" Wade asked. She handed him the page. One entry read, female, age approx. 8, yellow ribbon, transferred North Holding, Stonewater. Wade looked at her. "You know her?" Eliza nodded once. Her face had gone hard in a way he had never seen before. Harder than fear, harder than anger. There was a little girl in the first camp. She kept crying for her mother. One of the men said the yellow ribbon made her easy to remember. Wade folded the page and tucked it into his vest. "Then we remember her." Eliza closed the ledger and set it back down with great care. Too much care. Wade recognized that too. It was what people did when rage had become so sharp they were afraid it would split them open. They buried what little they could beneath the wagon and burned the rest. Not from mercy, from necessity. Wade would not leave records like that for jackals to collect. By dusk, San Tomas rose ahead of them in a haze of heat and dust. It was bigger than the towns Wade preferred and dirtier than the ones that admitted what they were. Rail line cutting through one side. Hotel on the rise. Saloons and feed lots sprawled below. Smoke hanging over the rooftops. Money and filth wearing each other's coats. They did not ride straight in. Wade led them into a dry grove a mile north where an abandoned lime kiln sat half-collapsed into the hill. It gave shade, cover, and a view of the western road. He watered the horses while Eliza stood on the rise looking down at the town. "You been here before?" he asked. "Once, in a wagon, at night." She kept her eyes on the streets below. "I only remember the hotel lamps and a man laughing behind a closed door." Wade took that in. "Then we don't go near the hotel blind." Crow came up beside Eliza and leaned against her leg. She rested a hand on his head and went on staring down toward San Tomas. "My father always liked fine rooms. He thought velvet curtains made him respectable." "And did they?" She looked at Wade then. "You already know the answer." Night fell slow and hot. From the kiln they watched traffic in and out of town. Freight wagons, drifters, 2 ranch hands too drunk to sit straight in the saddle. Near full dark, 3 riders came up the west road in tight line, all wearing dark coats. One carried a lantern low. The hotel door opened before they even dismounted. Eliza saw it too. "That'll be them." Wade nodded. "Not tonight." She turned sharply. "They're there now. And they got numbers, walls, and probably men we ain't seen." He kept his tone flat. "Running hot gets you dead." Her eyes flashed. "Maybe I'm past caring." "That's a stupid thing to say." She stiffened. "You don't get to call me stupid." "No, but I get to call a stupid thought what it is." Wade stepped closer, not crowding her, just enough to make sure she listened. "You want him dead, fine. You want truth first, better. You want to make sure there aren't more girls like the one on that ledger, then you keep your temper tied down till the work's ready." For a second he thought she might slap him or turn away or do something just as fierce. Instead she looked toward the town again and said very quietly, "I hate that you're right. Get in line." That near smile touched her mouth again, small and worn and gone too soon. They waited until the deepest part of night before moving. Wade left the horses at the kiln, gave Crow a low command, and the dog stayed. Not happy about it, but he stayed. Wade and Eliza entered San Tomas on foot through the freight side where the yard smelled of coal, piss, and hot iron. He had learned in the war that towns had softer places if a man stopped pretending the front gate was the only entrance. The back of the hotel opened onto an alley lined with ash barrels and broken crates. Voices drifted from an upstairs room. One of the shutters stood cracked in the heat. Wade went first up the narrow service stairs. Eliza followed, light and silent. At the landing they crouched beneath the window and listened. A man inside said, "The next lot moves through Stonewater. Hob can hold them till the miners stop asking questions." Wade felt Eliza go still beside him. Another voice answered, smooth and familiar from no memory Wade wanted. "Then hold them. I was promised full payment once the papers clear." Eliza's hand closed on Wade's arm hard enough to hurt. "That's him," she breathed, "her father." Inside the room a third man laughed. "You bargained clean for a fellow who sold his own blood." The smooth voice gave a shrug Wade could hear in it. Blood is only useful if it buys obedience. Eliza started to rise. Wade caught her wrist and shook his head once. "Not yet." The third man spoke again. "And the girl?" "Dead by now," her father said. Wade heard the breath leave Eliza through her teeth. Then the man added, almost bored, "Though if she lives I want her taken whole. Templeton offered double." Wade's eyes narrowed. That name again. Another buyer, another layer. The floorboard inside creaked. Chairs scraped back. No more time. Wade rose in one motion and drove his shoulder through the shutter. Wood splintered inward. Eliza came through behind him with the revolver up. 3 men at the table, one thin and bearded with a ledger in hand, one broad in city clothes reaching for a pistol, and one silver-haired man in a fine coat whose face went empty when he saw the woman in the doorway. Eliza pointed the gun straight at him. "You should have let me die, father." For one stunned second nobody in the room moved. The lamp on the table hissed softly. Cards lifted in the warm draft from the broken shutter. The silver-haired man at the far side of the room stood frozen with one hand still resting on the back of his chair. He was older than Eliza and Wade had imagined, but not weak. Men like that rarely were. His face had the polished look of a banker or judge. Good coat, clean collar, hands that had signed away lives without ever dirtying themselves with the taking. But his eyes gave him away. Not grief, not shame, calculation. "Eliza," he said at last, like he was correcting a clerk. She did not lower the revolver. "Don't say my name like you kept it." The broad man nearest the sideboard reached for his pistol. Wade shot him first. The blast filled the room and the man crashed backward into the mirror, taking half the glass down with him. The thin man with the ledger ducked under the table, scrambling for the door, but Eliza swung the revolver his way and barked, "Stay down." Something in her voice stopped him colder than the gun. He flattened himself to the boards. Only her father remained standing. He lifted both hands slowly. "Now, let's not turn this into theater." Wade almost laughed at that. Instead, he kicked the fallen pistol away with his boot and kept his rifle leveled. Eliza moved farther into the room until the barrel of her revolver was no more than 10 feet from her father's chest. "You sold me," she said. Mr. Vale smoothed one sleeve with his thumb as if the accusation had wrinkled him. "I arranged for your future under difficult circumstances." Her face changed then. Not louder, not wilder, just stripped of the last bit of doubt. "You sold me." He looked at Wade as though annoyed by the need to explain himself in front of a ranch hand. "My wife died. The land was under lien. Creditors were circling." "Do you imagine sentiment pays notes?" Wade answered before Eliza could. "It ought to keep a man from trafficking his own daughter." Vale's gaze settled on him, cool, dismissive. "And you are." Wade did not bother with titles. "The man standing between you and another lie." Eliza never took her eyes off her father. "You had me marked." It was practical. That single word hung in the room like rot. From beneath the table the thin man made a small frightened sound. Eliza ignored him. "You told people I was dead." Vale gave a faint shrug. "That part became necessary." "For the land." "For peace." His eyes sharpened. "You were always difficult after your mother passed. Too much of her in you, too little sense." Wade saw Eliza's hand tighten on the grip. He watched her breathing the way he watched a skittish horse near a cliff. One wrong push and everything would go bad all at once. Ask him about the camps, Wade said quietly. Eliza swallowed once. Stonewater, the wagons, the girls. Ask me again what peace cost. For the first time something like irritation crossed Vale's face. Not guilt, just impatience. I did not manage every stage of transport. Wade felt real hatred rise in him then, not because the man was cruel. Cruel men were common, because he spoke of human misery like spoiled freight. Eliza's voice dropped lower. A little girl with a yellow ribbon. Did she mean anything to you? No. That answer landed like a hammer. Eliza fired. The shot tore through the lapel of Vale's coat and buried itself in the wall behind him. She had missed on purpose by less than an inch. Wade knew it, so did her father. A dark, wet line crept across the fabric where the bullet had grazed him. Vale flinched at last. Good, he was human enough for fear after all. Where is Templeton? Eliza asked. Vale looked at the blood on his coat, then at her. If I answer, do I walk out of here? No, she said. He almost smiled. Then why would I help you? Wade stepped forward and drove the butt of the rifle into the edge of the table hard enough to split the wood. The ledger man yelped beneath it. Because I can still break the parts of you that ain't essential to talking. Vale looked at Wade again. Different this time, measuring him now, realizing this was not a lawman to bribe or a timid suitor to dismiss. Templeton is outside town, Vale said. South Ridge House, old adobe with the iron gate. And Clive Doran? Wade asked, using the name they had heard in that upstairs room in the draft of the last chapter. Wait, actually in this rewrite Clive Doran hasn't been introduced. Need keep consistency. Remove, ask about Stonewater/Hobb maybe. Let's continue carefully without inconsistency. Will not mention new unsupported name. And the mine in Stonewater? Wade asked. Vale's mouth thinned. Managed by Cyrus Hobb. Eliza looked at Wade. There it was, another name, another link. The little girl's taken north, she said. Where are they held before Stonewater? Vale hesitated. Wade shifted the rifle. Vale exhaled. Way station past Dry Lantern Pass, a holding ranch, 2 days east. Eliza's face went white under the dust. How many? I don't know. She took one step closer. How many? I don't know exactly. That was answer enough. More than one, maybe many. From the hallway came the sound of running boots. Wade turned toward the door just as someone outside shouted, Mr. Vale. The ledger man under the table chose that moment to bolt. He lunged for the far wall. Wade grabbed his collar, but the man twisted free and flung the ledger into the oil lamp. Glass shattered. Flame jumped across the tablecloth in a bright, hungry burst. Everything went bad at once. Eliza moved first. She kicked the burning cloth toward the wall to keep it from dropping between them. Wade swung the rifle toward the door and fired through the panel just as the first guard came through. The man screamed and fell back into the hall, tangling the one behind him. Vale dove sideways toward the sideboard, reaching for a hidden drawer. Eliza! Wade shouted. She turned and shot her father through the hand before he could pull the pistol free. He cried out and dropped to one knee. Not dead, still not dead. Smoke started to roll fast across the ceiling. Out the window, Wade snapped. I am not leaving him, Eliza said. You leave now or we burn with him. For a split second Wade thought she would refuse. Then Crow's bark exploded from the alley below, sharp and furious. The dog had broken command and come anyway. Good. Wade seized the ledger from the floor with his free hand. Eliza stepped back toward the shattered shutter, still aiming at her father. Vale clutched his bleeding hand and stared up at her through smoke and firelight. You were born for comfort, he rasped. Look what you've made yourself. That was the wrong thing to say. Eliza's eyes went flat, empty of hurt now, empty of pleading, empty of anything he could still touch. No, she said, look what survived you. She shot him through the chest. The force knocked him back against the sideboard. He slid down it slow, leaving a dark streak behind. He looked shocked more than pained, as if the world had finally broken one rule in her favor. Then Wade shoved Eliza through the window. He came after her a second later, landing hard in the alley as smoke burst from the upstairs room behind them. Crow was there at once, spinning, barking, teeth bared toward the back stair as more men shouted inside the hotel. Eliza hit the dirt on one knee, came up breathing hard, revolver still in hand. "This way," Wade said. They ran. Through the rail yard first, ducking between freight crates and ash barrels while men yelled behind them. A shot cracked off brick near Wade's shoulder. Another kicked sparks from the track. Crow stayed low, darting ahead, then back, guiding them through the dark as if he had walked San Tomas his whole life. Eliza kept pace, though Wade could hear the strain in every breath now. They reached the edge of the yard, where the ground dropped into a drainage cut full of broken bottles and thorn brush. Wade slid down first, caught Eliza by the forearm, and half dragged her through the ditch to the far bank. Crow leapt it clean. They did not stop until the town lights were a smear behind them, and the abandoned lime kiln rose out of the dark like a crouched beast. The horses were still there. Thank God. Wade got Eliza into the saddle and mounted the bay in one motion. Crow took the lead before either horse was fully turned. They rode north through the mesquite with no trail but moonlight, putting distance between themselves and the town before the alarm could spread wider. Only when San Tomas had vanished behind the ridges did Wade pull up in a narrow wash lined with stone. The horses stood blowing hard. Eliza swayed in the saddle. He dismounted and reached up. This time when he took hold of her waist to help her down, she did not flinch. She landed unsteady and leaned one hand against the horse, looking not at Wade but somewhere past him, somewhere far from the wash. "You got him," Wade said. She nodded once. "How do you feel?" That brought a strange look to her face, tired, bitter, honest, like he's still not the worst of it. Wade understood. A father could die and still leave half his damage walking around in other men's boots. He opened the ledger under the moonlight. Most pages were smoke-stained but legible. Columns of dates, routes, payments, symbols. A few full names. Enough to hang men if hanging were the kind of justice this country ever managed cleanly. Eliza moved beside him and traced one line with her finger. "There," she said. Wade read it. Transfer 2 females, 1 juvenile, 1 adult. Way station, Dry Lantern Pass. Hold for Hob convoy. Below that another note. Expected buyer inspection, Templeton. Wade looked up. Templeton ain't just buying land. "No," Eliza said. "He's buying the whole chain." Crow gave a low warning sound toward the south, ears pricked. Wade shut the ledger. "Then next stop is Dry Lantern Pass." Eliza stared into the dark where San Tomas lay somewhere beyond the ridges, burning or not, it no longer mattered. When she spoke, her voice had changed. The grief was still there, the fury too, but something steadier had taken root under both. "We go there first," she said. "We get the girls out." Wade nodded, and then. She looked at the ledger in his hands. "Then we bury the men who built this." Crow stepped between them and pressed his shoulder against Eliza's leg. She rested her hand on his back and finally let one long breath go into the night. Wade did not speak for a while. Then, because truth was easier after fire, he said, "You know I never wanted that promise your father made." Eliza turned to him slowly. "I know," he said, "and I know that matters." Moonlight caught the line of her cheek. The wind moved a strand of hair across her face. "Good," she said, "because if anything stands between us now, it won't be a promise made over paper." Wade held her gaze. "Then what will it be?" Eliza looked down at Crow, then out toward the black mouth of the pass ahead. "What we choose after this is over." That answer settled deeper in him than he liked. Before dawn they rode again. Dry Lantern Pass lived up to its name. By the time Wade, Eliza, and Crow reached it, the sun had turned mean and white, and the whole stretch of country looked like something burned long ago and never forgiven. The trail cut through black rock and pale dust, with old wagon ruts baked so deep they seemed carved by years of pain instead of wheels. Nothing green grew there except a few stubborn thorn bushes clinging to cracks in the stone. Even the wind felt dead. Crow moved ahead without a sound, nose low, tail straight, every now and then stopping to listen toward the eastern rise. Eliza rode with the ledger tucked inside her coat and the revolver high on her hip. She had not said much since San Tomas. Wade understood why. A person could kill the man who made them and still wake up carrying him inside. They found the holding ranch just before dusk. It sat in a bowl of land below the pass, hidden from the main trail by a ring of broken rock and scrub. From a distance it looked abandoned. Close up, Wade saw too many signs of use. Fresh horse droppings, a water trough half full, smoke lifting thin from a cook pit. The main house was not really a house at all, just a long adobe building with two side sheds and a corral made from rough poles. Men who planned evil did not always build fancy for it. Sometimes they built plain and practical because suffering was easier to manage that way. Wade, Eliza, and Crow watched from the ridge while the light faded. 2 guards at the front. One at the corral, another passing now and then between the sheds with a lantern. Somewhere below, a child coughed. Eliza closed her eyes at that sound, only for a second. Then she opened them and said, "We do this clean." "That was the plan," Wade answered. "No fire unless we must, no missed shots, no leaving anyone behind." Wade looked at her profile against the dying light. There was iron in her now, not the wild kind born of rage alone, better than that, chosen steel. All right. They waited until dark was full and the moon still low. Wade circled west to the corral side. Eliza took the ridge path above the sheds. Crow stayed with Wade until the last moment, then slipped away on his own, shadow moving through shadow. Wade trusted that dog more than maps or luck. He got within 20 feet of the corral guard before the man noticed anything. By then it was too late. Wade came up behind him, locked an arm across his throat, and dragged him backward into the dust. The struggle lasted only seconds. When it ended, the guard lay still and Wade lowered him quiet. From the far side of the ranch came a soft thud, then another. Eliza was doing her part. Wade moved along the shed wall until he reached the barred side door. He heard it clearly now. Not one child. Several breathing, whispering, someone crying into a cloth to keep it small. Wade set his shoulder to the latch and found it bolted from inside. He backed up 1 step and kicked hard beside the iron hinge. The wood split. He went through with the rifle up. Inside, the lantern was low but enough to show the shape of things. 3 girls against the back wall, 1 boy maybe 10, 2 women with chain on 1 ankle each. One of them rose so fast she nearly fell. Fear turned every face toward him at once. "It's all right," Wade said, though he knew that was never enough. "We're getting you out." A girl's voice came from the dark corner. "That's what they all say." Before Wade could answer, the outer door at the other end burst open and a man came in with a shotgun half raised. Eliza shot him from the threshold behind him. The blast spun him into the wall. She stepped over the body and looked around the room. Wade saw it hit her all at once. Not memory exactly. Recognition. The shape of chained people. The smell. The cramped air. The silence of the ones too frightened to believe rescue yet. Her voice came low and steady. "Anyone who can walk comes now." One of the women stared at the mark on Eliza's wrist where her sleeve had pulled back. A look passed over her face. Not fear, understanding. "You were one of us." Eliza did not answer that. She crossed to the chains instead and fired once into the floor shackle to break the pin loose. Wade used the dead guard's keys on the others. Outside, Crow barked once, sharp and urgent. "More men coming." "Move," Wade said. They got the captives through the side door and into the dark behind the sheds. Crow materialized out of nowhere and pressed against the youngest girl's leg until she stopped shaking enough to walk. Wade put the boy on the sorrel mare bareback and lifted the smallest child up behind him. Eliza counted heads twice. 7, she said. Ledger said 2 from the last transfer. "Maybe more are coming. Or already gone." Neither of them liked that. Boots pounded from the main house. A voice shouted for Hob. Another cursed about the dead by the front gate. Then came a third voice, louder than the rest, full of anger and command. Wade knew at once. A man used to being obeyed. Cyrus Hobbs stepped into the yard carrying a lantern in one hand and a revolver in the other. He was thick through the middle, beard trimmed too neat for a place like this, shirt sleeves rolled as if he liked to play at being practical while others dirtied themselves for him. 2 men flanked him. Another ran from the cook pit pulling on his gun belt. Eliza stopped dead when she saw Hobb. Wade saw something pass through her face like an old wound opening. "That him?" he asked. "Yes." Hobb lifted the lantern. His eyes found Eliza, then widened. "Well now, thought the desert finished you." Eliza stepped into the open before Wade could stop her. "You should have made sure." Hobb laughed once, ugly sound. "You were purchase damaged, I did what I could." Wade had heard enough. He fired first and dropped the man to Hobb's left. The yard exploded. Gunshots cracked off adobe walls. Lantern glass shattered. The horses screamed and pulled at their reins. Crow launched at the second gunman and dragged him sideways before he could aim straight. Eliza and Hobb fired at nearly the same moment. Her shot tore through his shoulder. His caught the side post beside her head and filled the air with splinters. The captives huddled low behind the shed. Wade moved between them and the yard, firing from the corner. He hit the cook pit man in the thigh and the fellow went down yelling. Hobb staggered back toward the main house, one hand pressed to his shoulder, still trying to raise the revolver with the other. Eliza followed him. Wade cursed under his breath and went after her. Inside the main room, the air stank of grease and hot metal. Hobb had made it as far as the table. He was reaching for a rifle propped in the corner when Eliza kicked it away and leveled the revolver at his chest. "You remember the little girl with the yellow ribbon?" she asked. Blood seeped through his fingers. Hobb tried to grin anyway. "I remember Prophet, faces blur." Eliza's eyes did not move. "Then let me make this plain," she mattered. Hobb spat at the floor. "You think killing me changes the trade?" "No," Wade said from the doorway, "but it changes your part in it." Hobb looked between them and saw the truth too late. No bargaining left. No corner to buy his way out of. He straightened as much as the wound allowed and said, "Templeton will replace me before dawn." Eliza answered, "Then Dawn will be busy." She shot him once through the heart. The room went still. Outside, the last hired man threw down his weapon when Crow came for him a second time. Wade bound his hands and dragged him to the corral post. Then he got the captives mounted, paired the older with the younger, and led them out through the north cut before any more riders could arrive. They made camp far from the ranch in a hidden grove where a spring still ran beneath the stone. For the first time since Wade had found her in the dust, Eliza slept without crying out. Morning brought a different kind of work. One of the freed women knew a preacher in Hollow Bend who still had enough courage to take in runaways without asking the wrong questions. Wade decided that was where the captives would go. Eliza agreed. They rode half the day with the group, delivered them safe to the preacher's place by sundown, and left the ledger in his hands with 2 names circled hard in pencil: Templeton and the Rail Hotel broker from San Tomas. Let decent men use paper if they wanted. Wade had never trusted paper much, but sometimes it gave grief a trail to follow. 3 days later, when the children were sheltered and the wounded woman strong enough to smile at Crow, Wade and Eliza rode back north alone. Not to San Tomas, not to Dry Lantern Pass. Home. Cottonwood Hollow met them with evening light and wind moving gentle through the trees. The cabin looked just as it had before, all of it. Crooked roof. One shutter hanging wrong. Ashes cold in the stone ring. A place too small for the things it had held. Wade dismounted and stood for a moment with one hand on the saddle horn. Eliza slid down slower. Crow ran ahead to the door, then turned back as if counting them. They put the horses up, drew water, and sat on the porch with no need to speak right away. Some silences were emptier than others. This one held rest inside it. The sun dropped red behind the ridge. Night began to climb out of the wash. Crow settled at Eliza's boots with a sigh so deep it sounded like a man done with war. After a while, Eliza said, The promise between our families is dead." Wade looked out over the hollow. It was dead long before now. Yes, she rested her hands in her lap. The mark on her wrist caught the last light. Good. He turned then. "You worried I'd ask for it?" "No," she met his eyes. "I worried you wouldn't know the difference." That hit him honest. Wade nodded once. "I do." A faint breeze moved her hair across her cheek. She did not brush it away. "Then hear this plain. I won't be owned by a father, a bargain, or even a kind man who saved me." "I know." She held his gaze another second. "But I might stay if it's my choice." Wade looked at her for a long time. At the woman Crow had found half buried in the dust. At the promised bride he had never met. At the person she had become after surviving men who should have killed softer souls. Then he said the only thing worth saying. "Then stay for that." Her eyes shone, though no tears fell. She leaned down and rested a hand on Crow's neck. The dog lifted his head, satisfied in that quiet animal way of his, as if this was what he had been trying to tell them from the first day. The land had not changed. The desert was still hard. Men like Templeton still breathed somewhere for now, until the ledger or a bullet caught up to them. There would be other girls needing roads opened and doors broken. Other evils hiding in plain rooms. Wade knew that. Eliza knew it too. But when the stars came out over Cottonwood Hollow and the porch boards cooled under their boots, neither of them rose to chase the next war just yet. For one night, that was enough. And when Eliza finally stood to go inside, she did not leave Crow on the porch. She looked at Wade once over her shoulder and said, "You coming?" He rose without answering. Crow went in first.